Can I pour grease down the drain? What we've done is I've kind of temporarily rerouted my own kitchen sink drain line through this short clear pipe and into a bucket that's sitting here in the middle of my kitchen floor. I've taken my collection of grease from my fridge and I've put it back in the pan to get it warmed up, and now it's all liquidy, and we're gonna put it down the drain line in a couple of different ways to kind of show you what happens when we put grease down the drain. General rule of thumb is you don't want to pour grease down the drain, because what happens is on a long enough timeline you pour grease down the drain, and most people do this with hot water. They'll rinse their plates with hot water, they'll pour it down the drain and run a whole bunch of hot water behind it because they know that hot water makes the grease get real liquidy, and they think that if they can make the grease liquid it'll flow on down the drain and not be a problem anymore. Well, what happens is your drain lines actually aren't that warm, and so no matter how hot you get the grease, it cools off fairly quickly in the drain line, and then as it cools off, it coagulates on the side walls of the pipe. And as it coagulates on the side walls of the pipe, after many applications of that, you end up closing in the pipe to where it's nothing but grease at that point, and there's just a tiny little hole to work through. If you have to do it, use cold water. Because what happens if you use cold water, then that liquid grease solidifies in the sink, in the water stream before it even goes down the drain. And it solidifies and turns into tiny little balls. And then as those tiny little balls are flowing down the drain line, they're already cold, they're already solid, and so they'll bounce on the drain line and just go right on down the system, no big deal. Now, it is more difficult to get the grease off of your pan and off of your plate and everything else with cold water. However, for your drain system, that's what we want to shoot for. So we have a little bit of residual grease, and this is probably very similar to the amount of grease that somebody might be pouring down the drain line at a time. There's a few psychotic people out there that are literally pouring panfuls of grease down the drain line. You don't want to do that. But really where I think this comes in most is going to be, you know, you've cleaned most of the grease out of your plate, you've just got a little bit left, or most of the grease off the pan and there's a little left, and we're comfortable with that little bit going down the drain. So that's very much what we have here. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to run the sink with cold water, and I'm gonna pour this down the drain at the same time, and we've set a strainer up on this bucket. We should see a whole bunch of solid grease balls landing on this strainer to prove the theory that if we run grease down the sink with cold water, it solidifies into solid balls and they'll bounce on down the drain line. So let's try it. And I'm just gonna pour our grease right into the drain. We've just shown by the amount of grease hanging out on the top of our screen here that when you run grease down the drain with cold water, it solidifies into hard little balls or hard little molecules, and they'll bounce on down the drain as a solid instead of as a liquid. And essentially, you just don't want the grease entering the drain as a liquid. You want it to enter the drain as a solid. Again, if you have to pour grease down the drain. But you see the collection of grease we have on top of the screen here, and that shows you that it was running down the drain as a semi-solid or a solid, and it's not gonna stick to the walls of the drain pipe. We're gonna do the exact same thing again. We're gonna do it with hot water, and it just goes right into the drain line, which means it's going to solidify in the pipe somewhere. And when it solidifies in the pipe, it's sticking itself to the side walls of the pipe. And eventually, over time, that's gonna cause you a drain clog. We're even gonna do what everyone else does. We're gonna clean our pan in the sink. So now we've poured all the grease down. So there we go. What I want you to notice is when we ran it with cold water, we had a massive pile of grease on top, and we were only 2 large serving spoons of grease. And we had almost that much grease sitting on top of our strainer. When we cleaned the thing out with hot water and we ran a lot of hot water afterwards and everything else, literally the only thing left on our screen was solid debris. These are probably like bacon chunks or something. It's solid debris that's not even really grease. All of the grease went through the screen. And so what happens then is somewhere down the drain line, obviously not in the first 2 or 3 feet of drain line, but somewhere down the drain line, that grease will solidify and stick to the sidewalls of pipe somewhere. And on a long enough timeline, that closes in and causes you a drain clog. Then what we have to do is bring in one of these guys and auger your drain. And basically, this is a drain cable and it goes down the drain line. There's not a whole lot of rocket science to running these things. Basically, this flexible cable goes down the drain line and helps kick some of that debris loose and tries to get it to flow on down the line. We've had a lot of customers that their drain lines are so caked with grease, we can't get them augered open. And there's just no way to get the stuff moving. There's so much grease in there and for so long. Usually picture like a long tube of peanut butter. How would you get the peanut butter out of the middle of that tube? It just sticks to itself over and over and over. Basically what we're dealing with grease in the lines. And so in those cases, we have to cut out their drain lines and replace them. And so you go from a minor drain cleaning to a major pipe replacement, and now all of a sudden pouring grease down the drain got really, really expensive. I think we've done a pretty good job of showing exactly what happens when you pour grease down the drain and how it delays where it lodges in the pipe. It doesn't do it right here. It's doing it deep down into your piping system. But we've also shown that if you just refuse to stop pouring grease down the drain, we've also shown that if you do it with cold water, you're not gonna have a problem near as soon than if you do it with hot water. Obviously, avoid hot water at all costs. If you have to pour grease down the drain, do it with cold water. But as a professional plumber with years and years and years of experience, I'm gonna suggest you don't pour it down the drain. I'm gonna suggest that you let it cool off and get a little more solid, and then you get a good durable cup and you pour it into a cup. You could even do like a metal cup. I remember as a kid growing up, my mom used to use a soup can, a large soup can, because she wasn't worried about the plastic melting. You know, super hot grease could come into here and melt one of these really fast. And so you're gonna pour it in that, you set it in the refrigerator, you let it coagulate up and get really solid. And then if you're using like a soup can, you just throw the whole can away. We've reused this cup for years and years and years. I've been married, 16 years, and I think I've had this cup as our grease cup for our whole marriage. We just basically take this cup and we run hot water around the outside of it to break up the grease and get it unstuck from the sidewalls, and then we take the cup and turn it upside down in the trash can and just plop the grease right into the trash. We just throw it away. That's the easiest way to get rid of it, to where I don't have to worry about drain clogs in the future. The other part of me says, yeah, go ahead and pour grease down the drains because it means more work for us. So frankly, I don't really care what you do. This is just an informational video to let you know what could happen if you do it. I'm not gonna discourage you from doing it because we make a lot of money replacing your drain lines. So if you want, feel free to pour it down your drains. All right, so that wraps it up for your tutorial on what happens when you put grease down the drain. Tune in next time. As always, we like to bring you plumbing videos like you've never seen before, kind of showing you the ins and outs and the insides of plumbing. I'm gonna get all this cleaned up so my wife doesn't kick my butt when she comes home and wonders what's going on. And until next time, guys, we will see you later.